Training for cultural transformation. Thank you for standing with us.
Welcome to Today's Issues, offering a Christian response to the issues of the day. Here's your host, Tim Wildman, President of the American Family Association.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. Thanks for listening to AFR on this Thursday, October the 19th, 2023. I'm Tim Wildman. In studio with me is Fred Jackson. Good morning, Fred.
Good morning, Tim.
We're in Tupelo, MS, and in Kansas City, KS, is our good friend Ray Pritchard. Good morning, Ray.
Good morning, Tim. How you doing today?
Having a good day so far?
Good.
So, that would mean to say I'm looking forward to not having a rest of the day, but so far, so good. So far, so good. We thank everybody for listening to American Family Radio. Ray, how you doing on your Year Through the Bible video readings?
Oh, we are right on track, Tim. We're deep inside the book of Jeremiah right now, Jeremiah 9, 10, 11, and 12. And let me tell you, he's not happy. It's a mess in Judah, and Jeremiah is not happy about what's going on. But we're having a great time, and so, folks, and I want to say, Tim, we have had so many AFR listeners join us on this journey through the Word of God. Every morning, post a new video, and so right now going through the book of Jeremiah. But if you stay with us, because we're hopping back and forth between the Old and New Testament, we're going to be in the book of Revelation the last week of December, so we're right on track. Come see us. Come check out these videos at keepbelieving.com.
Keepbelieving.com. Ray is doing a Year Through the Bible video readings, and so he started in January, and unlike Brother Tim, who about mid-March says I'm a failure. I'm a failure.
A lot of people don't make it out of January, Tim. So
well, you know what I decided? I'm not going to guilt trip myself with a year. Although I admire people, absolutely admire people who can stay on it and go through a year as you're doing, Ray. A great admiration for you for doing this. Of course, you put a lot of public pressure on yourself.
I can't quit now, right? I can't take a day off.
No,
right?
When it's just us individually, we go, I'm not going to make it on this. I'm not going to be able to keep up. So anyway, just read the Bible and read through the Bible. If you can read through the Bible in a year, or if it takes you a year and a half, or whatever the case may be.
People ask me, Tim, what's the best translation to read? The best translation is the one you will read. So better than having 10 translations you never read, find a good translation and read it. God will bless you.
So am I understanding you right with Jeremiah the prophet?
Right.
His message would not be described as what you say most days, it's all good. With Jeremiah, it's not all good, right?
It's not all good.
No.
They call him the weeping prophet for a reason. I mean, he prophesied during the closing days of Judah when they had gone far, far, far from God, and Nebuchadnezzar's army was knocking on the door and was about to knock it down and destroy the city Jerusalem. So it's bad news followed by more bad news, followed by some really bad news. And then the next chapter, more of the same. So
how many more chapters you got before you get through Jeremiah?
Okay, there are 52 chapters. So after today, we got about 40 more to go. There is hope. There's always hope, right? Because of the grace of God. But in the nature of the case, I'm telling people, I like to get little themes for these different books, and I'm calling Jeremiah Eve of Destruction. He's there on the eve of destruction, warning people, look, God told you this is going to happen. And guess what, friends? It's happening to you, and it's about to get worse. So if you don't want this to come, better get right with God now. It's a sobering message, and he's wow. It's bad, Fred. It's a lot of bad news in the book of Jeremiah.
It's a lot of bad news, but you know what? It follows a long period of rebellion against God. And it's a lesson for today.
You mean by the Israelites?
By the Israelites. They just kept rebelling. They adopted the pagan religions of their neighbors, and they sacrificed their children. And God warned them and warned them and warned them and warned them, and they did not listen. So it's a story about when God says stop doing something or don't do something, and you do it, and he says stop. I'm going to judge you, and you don't stop.
Right.
It's kind of reminds us of maybe where we are today in many sectors of our society.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, the scriptures say, be not deceived, God is not mocked. Whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. And I think that same principle applies to nations.
Yes.
And to your point, Fred, and what Ray's saying with Jeremiah is, if you apply that to our country today,
mm-hmm.
the U.S., if we keep, as a nation in general, rebelling against God,
yes,
then we're going to suffer the same terrible consequences down the road.
Well, God is a consistent God.
Right.
You know, he's not going to say, well, you're the United States, I won't treat you like I did other rebellious nations.
Right. How do you, Ray, just quickly, I know I just made that proclamation that, I applied that scripture, which is really intended for the individual.
Sure.
But how do you, is that, then I said it's also true of nations. Am I distorting scripture there, or you think the principle?
Well, no,
applies?
because we understand, and we talk about this a lot,
right,
that America was founded by on what you might call generally biblical principles.
right.
That you go back. We've talked about this so much. Our founding fathers, they had respect for God, and if they were not all perfectly practicing Christians, they respected God. They respected the Bible. We have gone so far from that, and I think one of the real messages here is what 1 Peter says: judgment begins at the house of God. Everybody who calls themselves a Christian, while you're pointing fingers at others, remember God said judgment begins first at the house of God. So I think we do need to issue the word of warning to others, but also to the man in the mirror. So when I read Jeremiah, I think, okay, Pastor Ray, how well are you doing in obeying and following the Lord?
Amen.
One of the warnings I know in Scripture and the prophets were to the shepherds. And the shepherds were the religious leaders, as Ray is alluding to there. Many times, as we've seen even in modern days in some of these larger denominations that have wandered far from the authority of Scripture, it started at the top. Usually the rebellion against God doesn't start in the pew. Right. It starts in the top.
Yeah. All right, you're listening to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. Kirby Anderson will be with us at 10:30. Jan Markell will be with us momentarily. With respect to our interview with Kirby, we've heard a lot about Iran, and their religious views, the Shia branch of Islam, if you want to call it a branch, and how the interpretation of the mullahs there is what drives their hatred for Israel and for America, and Judaism and Christianity too. So we're going to talk about that with Kirby Anderson. It's very interesting what Kirby will be able to, the light he will be able to shed, I should say, on that.
Right.
There is one bit of breaking news. Is that right?
Yeah, breaking news out of Atlanta, Georgia, just in the last hour or so. High-profile Trump lawyer Sidney Powell has pleaded guilty to reduced charges this morning. And basically, she has had the felony charges diminished. She's pled guilty to 6 misdemeanor charges, and she will serve 6 years of probation, and she'll pay a $6,000 fine, and she has agreed to testify against others, and there's more than a dozen others who have been charged in the Georgia case, and that, amongst other things, that involved, according to the Associated Press, this is the way they described it, she participated in an unauthorized breach of elections equipment in a rural Georgia County election office. So, Sidney Powell, a face that became very familiar with us in the legal challenges of the Trump team in the wake of the 2020 election. And so this morning, she has pleaded guilty to 6 reduced misdemeanor charges.
Yeah. All right. As somebody who doesn't know squat about the legal system hardly, I'm going to comment on this. So take it for what it's worth. Listen, when a prosecutor like this district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia, comes after you on RICO charges, Now this was grand jury approved for what it's worth, because we are talking Fulton County,
yes,
which is 99% Democrats. Okay,
yes.
But let me just say this: yes, it quote looks bad when you plead guilty to a crime, right? However, when somebody's coming after you on RICO charges, and you're Sidney Powell, she's probably in her 60s, right? And you can do a plea deal, so to speak. Am I right about this? It's a plea deal, right?
That's correct.
And you can plea down to almost nothing, which is a few misdemeanors.
6 misdemeanors.
Misdemeanors, and you get that burden, that anxiety of possibly going to trial and getting a RICO conviction, as ridiculous as that sounds, on something like this. I mean, RICO, really, come on, man. This is for drug cartels and crime. Mafia stuff. That's what RICO was written for. Anyway, so, yes, the media is going to say, well, Sidney Powell pleaded guilty to and this and whatever. I'm just saying, when you're under the gun about something like this and you see a way to plea down to almost nothing, and you have that opportunity, rather than facing the prospect of going to trial and maybe getting found guilty by a jury that doesn't like Republicans, for example. I don't blame her for taking this, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, she's 68 years old.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to go to prison.
I know.
Yeah.
So that's squat.
Yes.
I just explained it to you, right? So it's going to be reported as Sidney Powell pleads guilty, and that makes the Trump claims there in Georgia look bad. So whatever you want to believe about that, but I'm just saying, if you're Sidney Powell, you take this deal.
Yes.
You think I'm right, Fred?
Oh, yeah.
On that?
You're exactly right. And, I'm just watching various networks, and they're going strong on this morning already. So just beware, folks. You're going to get a lot of coverage on the mainstream media about this today.
Yeah.
As an indication that, Trump's case is falling apart, folks.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what happens with the rest of you. Jenna Ellis, our own Jenna Ellis, she's one of the defendants there.
Yes.
And, her situation will come up before the court sometime in the next few months. So pray for Jenna. All Jenna did in this case is that she's been named, as I understand it, she went to one press conference.
Yeah.
In Georgia, and didn't even speak at it.
Yes.
She wasn't named. She wasn't an attorney of record in anything like Rudy Giuliani was, or maybe even Sidney Powell was. Jenna was almost a non-existent player in this, and yet she was named by this district attorney. So, listen, this district attorney in Fulton County, I think she's just trying to make a name for herself in the Democrat Party, so that she can. This is my thinking for her primary motivation here would be to run for governor of Georgia like Stacey Abrams did. Now, she didn't win, or maybe get a high-level position should a Democrat win the presidency. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So a notch in her belt, so to speak, politically, if you're coming from the left.
Yes.
All right, you're listening to today's issues on the American Family Radio Network. Thanks for listening to AFR. Tim, Fred, and Ray. We're joined now by our good friend Jan Markell, a host of Understanding the Times, heard Saturday afternoons at 1 p.m. Central Time and Sundays at noon Central Time right here on American Family Radio. Good morning, Jan.
Hello, gentlemen. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you. Fred, you had a question for Jan?
Yeah, we've gone through now 2 Sundays from the October 7th massacre there in Israel, where over 1,300 men, women, and children were massacred by Hamas terrorists. We've gone through 2 Sundays. And Jan, you wrote an article this week entitled "The Silence of the Shepherds," and you're hearing from people across the country who go to churches where the pastor has not even mentioned what has happened in Israel. Your thoughts on that?
That is correct. I'm getting emails and a lot of calls into the ministry from people who are in, I would say, fairly solid churches. I don't think that's the issue, but for some reason, the leadership, mainly the pastor, has chosen to be quiet about this. Now, the first Sunday would have been the day after the tragedy in southern Israel. That would have been October 8th. Then came Wednesday, and some people wrote and said, we didn't hear a word on Sunday or on Wednesday. Now, this is in light of the nonstop, literally wall-to-wall images that we're getting both in print and TV and online, where the horrors have been documented very appropriately. And I think at the very least, and gentlemen, I'm not sure if theology plays in here. I suspect some of these outfits may be replacement theology. The church is Israel. And in other cases, I think that the leadership sees this as a political issue, and they don't want to get involved in a political issue. And in other cases, I frankly don't know. But now we've had a second Sunday, and the same thing happened there. In some cases, the leadership did back down and said something, and in many cases, they're not. So I'm a bit puzzled, to be honest.
It's interesting, Jan, that what happened in Israel on October the 7th has been compared to America's 9/11.
Yes.
In fact, when you do a per capita comparison, what happened in Israel on October 7th is something akin to 30,000 Americans dying in a terrorist attack in one day. And I can't imagine any pastor in this country with 30,000 Americans dying in one day not saying anything from the pulpit. And for, in the wake of what happened in Israel, it's just hard to imagine. Ray, your thoughts on this as well?
Well, I think the theological issue is a really big deal. There are certain branches of the church that have bought into this replacement theology that the church takes the place of Israel, so they don't want to mention it for that reason. But even if you believe that, why wouldn't you, Jan, as you said in your article, why wouldn't you at least call attention to what's happening in the Middle East and pray? You said in your article, can't we pray for the salvation of Jews and Muslims? I mean, that's a minimal thing that pastors can do. And Jan, honestly, I don't understand why pastors wouldn't, since this is, as you said, wall-to-wall coverage. This is the number one story in the world. I don't understand why pastors won't at least pray for the gospel to be spread as a result of what is happening in the Middle East today.
Right. I mean, Ray, I think at the very least we should be praying on a humanitarian level for the suffering. And I wouldn't even have raised this, but once I got some emails, and then the calls coming into my ministry have been overwhelming. Before I wrote this, overwhelming that this is the case in their church. And in many cases, these folks are approaching their church leadership, and they're not being obnoxious about how they approach the leadership. They're just kind of saying, well, maybe we should at least have a corporate prayer for peace in the Middle East. How about Psalm 122:6, pray for the peace of Jerusalem? And they're getting met with, in some cases, kind of, if I can say, snarky answers, and in other cases, a downplaying of what's happened. And again, gentlemen, let's just look at it humanitarian-wise. And as Fred said, would be equal to 30,000 Americans that would in a catastrophe involving 30,000 Americans. And of course, nobody would be silent. But in this case, the church, not all. There are many churches that are having special prayer meetings, et cetera. So please don't hear anybody saying all, but too many are kind of looking the other way, and I hope this will change and I think it will, because the people in the church are applying pressure, and I think this will change.
We're talking to Jan Markell, host of Understanding the Times, here her weekends here on American Family Radio, 1 o'clock on Saturday Central Time, Sunday at noon Central Time, and we're talking about Israel and maybe what's going on in churches across America, particularly evangelical churches who have always been strongly interested in Israel and the Jewish people and what the Bible has to say about prophecy and so forth and so on.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to ask you this, Jan, because let me just make this observation, because last night I was reading more stories about what happened on that. Was it a Saturday or a Sunday?
Yeah.
Saturday morning
Saturday.
around 6:30.
Okay, was that
Israel
a
time.
week ago Saturday?
October 7th.
A week ago, yeah.
A week ago Saturday.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I was reading about this, and, because the news is every hour, 24 hours, we sort of move on from things that happened 2 weeks ago or whatever the case may be mentally. So you're looking at maybe what's happening today in Gaza, for example. But listen, I was reading stories about what happened. They were beyond horrific. What Hamas did that day, they went over the border, so to speak, between Gaza and Israel. They attacked civilians. This wasn't just the Israeli military that they were after. They butchered. I know there are children listening right now, and this is hard to stomach, and it's almost unbelievable, the evil that was on display that day. It was satanic. Mm-hmm. They went into they went into daycare centers and murdered all these babies. It was they hunted down people in their homes. It was I don't know. I don't have words to accurately describe it, except that it was raw evil. Mm-hmm. Listen, 1,300 or 1,400 people murdered that day. The idea that if I were the president of a country and I had people come over the border to do that to my citizens, my first instinct would be, okay, and I had the ability, let's just level everybody over there, okay? It's time to just turn Gaza into sand. Mm-hmm. And we're not even going to consider anything. We're not even going to take questions. These people murdered 1,400 of our citizens in one day. They're going down. They're going to be ended today. You know what I'm saying? Yep. That's the reaction. That's the visceral reaction to something like that, especially if you're the leader of a country. And yet, within 24 hours or less than this, there's these people calling for a ceasefire.
Yes.
Yeah.
A ceasefire. Israel hasn't even had a chance to retaliate against Hamas. And the fact that, so I'm just saying, I think Israel has, quite frankly, in many respects, shown great restraint. I know they are launching bombs into northern part of Gaza, but the fact that they haven't turned the Gaza Strip into glass after that is what word would I be searching for here? Commendable, yes. I guess you could say, in a way. All right, Jan, thanks for being on with us. We appreciate
Thank you so much.
Your program. And what's your website?
OliveTreeViews.org.
OliveTreeViews.org?
Correct.
Thank you, Jan. God bless you.
Thank you all. Goodbye now.
That was a Minnesota girl using y'all right there. Huh?
She talks to us frequently.
Been infected by
That's right.
their brethren from the South, evidently, on that word. All right, we will be back momentarily with more. Kirby Anderson, you're going to find this conversation very interesting. He's coming up next.
It's my turn.
Here is your host for My Turn, Don Wildman.
Most of us remember reading a short verse of Scripture in the book of Proverbs. Train up a child in the way he should go. I saw a tragedy last Sunday morning. I hope I see it again next Sunday morning. For I'd rather see the tragedy I saw than a greater one I fear will eventually occur. I'll call him Johnny. That's not his name, but for our purpose, that's what I'll call him. Johnny's in elementary school. He's in his formative years, and Johnny is the tragedy, or miracle as it may turn out to be. You see, Johnny came to Sunday school and worshiped by himself last week. He's been doing it for some time now. Sometimes Johnny will ride with a neighbor to the church. Sometimes when the weather is good, he'll walk. Sometimes a member of his family will bring Johnny to the church and drop him off. Now, what's the tragedy I saw? Just that. Someone in Johnny's family bringing Johnny, dropping him off to go by himself. Johnny's father and mother have something else to do, more important. And so Johnny managed to get to the place that would give him some direction in life all by himself. The story is repeated often in our society. However, I'm afraid it doesn't happen enough, for most Johnnies never manage to get to Sunday school and worship. They simply find more important things to do, like the rest of the family. How long little Johnny will continue to see to it that he gets himself to a place that can give him moral and spiritual instruction and guidance, I don't know. I hope he'll find strength in himself to continue the habit, but I'm afraid that one day Johnny will find it easier to sleep, or one Sunday the family will make some plans that will require Johnny to be away, and that will be followed by another Sunday with some more plans, and another and another. I guess what I'm really saying is that the pack is stacked against Johnny. The chances of his continuing his present habits are small. The odds against him are too heavy. Johnny will find further down the road that his visits to the house of God will have to cease. The family has other things to do, more important. Johnny is not a poor boy. His family is one of means. They have what most families long for, 2 cars, a fine home, modern conveniences, the whole works. Now, they're not millionaires, but they're well over the poverty line, materially speaking. And that's the tragedy. Johnny's family gives him everything he needs, except what he needs the most. And I guess if you ask them, Johnny's family would say they love him. Certainly there would be an emptiness in their home should Johnny suddenly die. But like I said, Johnny's chances are slim. There's just too much going against him. There's always that slight hope for a miracle, however. So I guess we can hope. But in a few years, if Johnny doesn't make it and he turns out wrong, don't be too hard on him, for as a youngster he really tried. Oh, incidentally, Johnny is not kin to you, is he?
This has been My Turn with Don Wildman, a production of the American Family Association.
The Lord looks down from heaven on all mankind to see if there are any who understand, any who seek God. Psalm 14:2.
American Family Radio. This is today's issues. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of today's issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of today's issues.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. Today's Issues is the name of this program. Hey, if you're wondering, who is that man that talks every day during this segment and tells the stories with It's My Turn? That is my dad. And Don Wildman, he is a reverend. He was a Methodist preacher for many years. And he wrote these stories in books. This is from the 60s and 70s primarily. All these stories that you hear him read, those are stories from his inspirational books. And so that's who that gentleman is right there. My dad's still alive. He's 85. Has dementia pretty bad. And so you can say a prayer for him. But he's the founder of this ministry. Without him, none of us would be talking here today. Mm-hmm. So that's who that is, if you're wondering. Does he say? I think he says his name on there on those spots. But I mean, people may be wondering who is that fella with that country accent telling these stories.
It's great that we can still hear his voice.
Amen. Yeah, those will be around.
And the wisdom in those, it may have been written 20, 25 years ago.
Yeah. Let me just tell you something interesting about that that story with my dad. Because I remember, I was the firstborn of 4, so I was born in '63. So Dad wrote those books in the late '60s, early to mid '70s. Wrote these stories I'm talking about. It's My Turn, and so Dad wrote and self-published what I would say inspirational books. Was inspirational Christian-based books, and he self-published, and he sold books through bookstores on consignment. Is that what you call it?
Consignment,
where you send them the books, and then they send you the money after they sell them.
After they sell, yeah.
So he would do that with hundreds of individual bookstores all over America. This is how he was a very entrepreneurial fella. That wasn't his motivation primarily because he was a Christian ministry. He wanted to get the gospel message out, but he was also very industrious and smart. And so we children would we would in our den. Okay, our den was not our den, but our living room. We didn't have a living room, is where Dad's books were. And we would stuff those books in, they had little boxes. They were gift books, basically. And so you'd stuff them in boxes, little small boxes, and Dad would ship them out. But I just remember this thing I do hold against my dad this day is that he paid me 1 penny for 4 books. And we couldn't unionize at the time. My brothers and sisters were younger than me, and I was only like 10. You know what I'm saying?
You couldn't go on strike, or if you did, it didn't last.
It didn't last. I guess Dad could have said, "Well, you want to eat?"
Yeah, that's right.
Get in there and stuff some books, okay? But anyway, do you know that listen to this now? He sold 500,000.
Wow.
Of those inspirational books. There were like 17 of them.
Yeah.
17 of those books over the span of probably 10 years.
My.
Through, he called it 5-star publishers. Well, there was no 5-star publishers. That was Dad and his kids. That's what 5-star publishers was. But it looked big. It looked big time on the side of the book. Said 5-star publishers. Well, 5-star publishers was our parsonage.
Isn't that amazing?
Back in the 70s. But anyway, that's quite a story. I could tell you a lot more on that. But
people don't understand, because now we've got Amazon, right? Everybody thinks of Amazon. They order through there, but there was a world before Amazon, folks.
Yes, and
there was a world before the internet and online ordering and all that. And to sell 500,000 copies through 5-star publishing in your, what did you say, your living room?
Yeah, out of our living room.
Out of your living room.
Now we did have Dad did publish the books at I think there was a publisher in Nashville, because we drove up there. I drove up there in a truck with him to get those books every so often. It was a Methodist house.
It could be Abington Press.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so he's a Methodist minister, so I think he used them to print the books.
Yeah,
and then we'd drive a truck up to Nashville.
But the distribution center was in Tupelo, Mississippi, in your living room.
1411 Van Buren Street, and it was a parsonage.
Yes,
I mean we didn't even own the house.
Yeah.
And later, Dad bought our own house. He was one of the first preachers to buy his own house, because he said, "What am I going to do? I'm going to be retirement age and not have a home that I own." So we bought our own home while he was a pastor.
Yeah.
For that reason. Anyway, there's so many stories. I could tell you more, but those are just childhood memories that I have of my dad, who you hear with those stories every day, and he's the founder of this ministry. All right, you're listening to Today's Issues on American Family Radio. I'm Tim with Fred and Ray, and now our good friend Kirby Anderson joins us from Kirby is the president of Probe Ministries, and also heard each day on Point of View on many of these American family radio stations in the evenings, and he's heard nationally on many radio stations with Point of View each afternoon, weekdays. Good morning to you, Kirby.
Good morning. Good to be with you and Fred and Ray.
Thank you. Kirby, before we get to what we're going to talk to you about, there is one story out there.
Yes, people have been following the chaos within the Republican Party with regards to naming a new speaker. And Jim Jordan, he is the head of the Judiciary Committee for the Republicans. He has allowed his name to go forward to a vote the last couple of days in the House, failed to win those votes both days. He announced this morning, I don't want another vote on me. And basically what he's doing is making a move to empower House Speaker Pro Tem Patrick Henry, McHenry, a congressman, I believe, from North Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And so
as interim.
Yes, he wants him to become the interim so they can do some business,
right,
including approving monies for Israel.
Right. So Jim Jordan, he tried twice.
Yes.
Wednesday and Thursday, unsuccessful in getting the number he needed. You're saying it is chaos right now in the Republican Party. It seems to me that's, and they need a leader.
Yes.
And so Jim Jordan himself has said, I'm not gonna put my name up today.
That's right.
Thursday, I won't. And is Jim Jordan back in this idea?
Oh yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well.
Yeah.
All right. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there. All right, Kirby. How's it going, my friend? How you doing?
Going very well. And again, the temporary Speaker of the House will have some pretty significant powers, they say. So it's almost as if he becomes Speaker of the House, at least for the moment, and maybe we can get some things done in the House of Representatives.
Well, Representative McHenry, he will become the interim Speaker of the House. I suspect that if he does a good job, he'll probably be elected Speaker. I
think that's a possibility. So we'll see.
If he wants,
you want to talk about other things, but I just have been hearing people say that given the fact that they want to give the interim speaker some very significant powers, I think for now maybe they've solved the problem, and that's certainly something we need to solve while we're looking at everything that's happening in Israel and everywhere else around the country.
Are they going to take away? Are they going to take away that rule where one person can call for a vote to vacate the speaker's seat? They got to get rid of that.
I don't think that rule. Yeah, I think they're getting rid of that one simply because he will be interim, so they don't have that kind of negotiation that took place before. Let's hope so, anyway.
I just don't like that. I don't like the idea of one person in a body that big being able to call on a vote to get rid of the leader, the speaker. It seems to me you got to have more consensus than that. You know,
should be a majority vote.
For sure.
Yeah. So Kirby, Iran. They are controlled by the mullahs. The mullahs are Shia Muslim, and they are always. I think they wake up every morning going, we need to condemn Israel this morning before breakfast. You know what I'm saying? That's what they live for this every day. It's just like insane. I'm going like, Israel's 1,000 miles from you. Why do you care about Israel every day, all day? So that's what I wanted to talk to you about, because this. Somebody told me this has to do with I was reading Marco Rubio. Well, I've heard you speak on this. I generally knew about this idea, but Marco Rubio, the senator from Florida, he had a tweet the other day, and he was explaining the religious beliefs of these mullahs is what drives their hatred about Israel and the Jews, and quite frankly, Christians and Americans are the West. So what is it that these mullahs believe? What drives them?
Let me explain that. And again, first of all, I had Senator Marco Rubio on just a few weeks ago on his book, excellent book, which I would recommend. But first of all, again, let's recognize the fact that we have two different groups of Muslims. You have mostly Sunni Muslims. Those are the kind of Muslims you'd find in Saudi Arabia and Turkey, Egypt. But then you have Sunni Muslims, Shiite Muslims that are different than the Sunni. And the Shiites are found primarily in maybe the southern part of Iran, and most of Iran, and a little bit in Iraq. So you can kind of end up with a very significant number of people that are running the country in Iran, and they all go back to a split that took place years ago, because after Muhammad died, there was a question as to whether or not you would actually have the community determine who the next follower is, or whether or not there would be somebody in the family line, kind of like what happened after the death of Alexander the Great. Who's going to be the successor? Well, the decision was is that the community would determine who would be the successor, and so the next few imams actually were following that. But the fourth imam was a man by the name of Ali, who was the son-in-law of Muhammad, and because he was there, eventually there began to be a war. These various imams and caliphs were actually killed. As a matter of fact, Ali was killed, and then he was replaced by his son Hussein. By the way, the name Hussein is really big in Islam. Has Saddam Hussein, Barack Hussein, Obama. Hussein was eventually killed, but I think the way to illustrate how crazy some of these ideas are, if you certainly will look at some of the pictures that happen once a year in Iran, you will see some of these men go into the streets, they'll take out their outer garbs, they will hit themselves on their shoulders and on their back and start bleeding, and that is to commemorate the death of Hussein. So I say that to help you understand that when we talk about Shiite Muslims, the ones in Iran and a little bit in Iraq, they are very different than the Muslims you might have next door. Well, again, they've had these different imams. You have 12 of these imams, and the 12th imam is called Mahdi, Imam al-Mahdi, and they believe that he didn't die. He just is gone and sort of disappeared. But they believe that eventually he will come back in the midst of this great conflict and then rescue the Shiites in a very significant way, which leads to my second point. Why would we care about such bizarre ideas? Well, because a very significant number, matter of fact, some people estimate perhaps as much as 85% of the Shia are actually Twelvers. They believe in this 12th Imam. They believe that he will come down in the midst of this conflict and protect them. And so as a result, they have this philosophy, I think, in Iran that actually they could fire nuclear weapons at Israel and destroy the little Satan, maybe even send nuclear weapons our direction and kill the great Satan, the United States, but the Mahdi would protect them. And I think you and Fred and Ray remember a time when we used to talk about mutually assured destruction, because Russia would not and Soviet Union would not think about firing nuclear weapons at us, because they know we would fire them back at them and destroy them as well. But if you have this really bizarre idea and belief of the Twelvers there in Iran, you might actually believe that you could go and destroy Israel with impunity, and that's why I think you have people like Marco Rubio and a variety of other people that have over the years written about the fact that this is a very dangerous ideology, and one more reason why we don't want Iran to get the nuclear weapon.
And Kirby, Fred here, the ultimate goal is they want a radical Islamic caliphate to rule the world. Isn't that the ultimate goal?
That is. And the ultimate idea, I think both Sunni and Shiite believe that. But again, the Twelvers, they believe that this al-Mahdi will come and really establish what's called an ummah, that is the Muslim community, will begin to implement Sharia law, that's Islamic law, and eventually that you would have this worldwide caliphate. And I want to get Ray involved with this, because if you think about this, we talk about end times prophecy in the Bible, or eschatology. Interestingly enough, the Shiite eschatology is almost reversed. They believe that this particular Mahdi, who we might think of as the Antichrist, will actually rule the world, and that the people that would be executed would be the Christians, or others that are maybe pagans, because they don't accept Muhammad as the one true God. In some respects, it does fit very much with what we talk about in terms of the tribulation, but it also illustrates the goal of not only just having Iran control individuals through the imams and the ayatollahs, but would want to have this happen worldwide. And certainly if they have nuclear weapons, they could destroy Israel. They could fire a nuclear weapon, for example, over the United States. It would cause an electromagnetic pulse, and those computers right there in your studio and those phones in your hands wouldn't be useful anymore. It would knock us back to the 18th century, and that would be, again, something that they would want to do to establish this worldwide caliphate.
Okay, Kirby, I have so many questions here, but let me just start at the beginning. This 12th Imam, are you saying he was an actual figure in Islamic history? There actually was this person who was, quote, living on the earth, I don't know, centuries ago or whenever. He had a name,
yes,
he lived.
Yeah.
And then
his name's Mahdi, 10th century. They had 12 imams. Now, the 12ers believe that all 12 of those imams are almost not quite divine, but they certainly are spiritual successors to Muhammad, and that they have divine powers. And you could see how this imam, I'm not saying that the Antichrist would be this Mahdi, but you could see how in some respects it fits very much with some of the things we've talked about before when we look at the book of Daniel or the book of Revelation.
Sure. Okay. Let me go back to this. This fellow who lived in the 10th century, this 12th Imam, you just gave his name. Did he die? What's he been doing? Where's he been from then until now?
Well, the Muslims use all sorts of fancy words, but they say he lives in occultation. In other words, he's sort of he's around, but he's not there. So it's not like he's in heaven with Allah, of course Allah, but he did live. He did not die. I guess you could say it'd be like Enoch or Elijah, to use a biblical idea, and yet he is promised to return again. So he's almost like a little bit of a Christ figure, if you think about that, because we believe that Christ will return again. These 12ers actually believe that this Mahdi will return again, and he will protect the world. So you don't know where all that comes from, but it's possible that some of that came from a maybe perverted understanding of biblical prophecy, and they maybe just had some kind of syncretistic ideas that came together and have this kind of 12er philosophy that Mahdi is in the world, but not physically yet, but will return again. So they're talking about a second coming, if you will, of this Imam called Al-Mahdi.
Kirby, are they thinking, I mean, could there be some strain among the 12ers who are thinking, if we kill Israel, if we wipe them off the face of the earth, if we get rid of the Jews, that will somehow hasten the appearance of this Mahdi?
You jumped right to it. There are some individuals. Now, let's recognize not everybody in leadership right now in Iran are 12ers, but a good example was the former president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. He was a 12er. That's one of the reasons why he was widening the roads and everything, because he was wanting to make Tehran a place where the Mahdi could come and bring his horde. But yes, there is this view, at least among many of these 12ers, that actually the way to hasten the return of the Mahdi is to actually create this global conflict that is talked about in some of their writings. So you can see why this idea of the 12ers is so much more dangerous. And of course, Joe Rosenberg has written about this and others. And of course, we mentioned Marco Rubio. These are individuals that just, in some respects, have such a different religious view that's what makes them so dangerous in terms of the worldwide conflict, and why so many individuals are convinced that it is not good that we have Muslim nations that have the nuclear weapon like Pakistan, but it would be even worse to have Iran have the nuclear bomb.
We're talking to Kirby Anderson, and I'm Tim Wildman with Fred Jackson and Ray Pritchard, and Kirby joins us from Dallas, and he's the president of Pro Ministries, and he's heard each day on the radio program Point of View across the country, including some of our stations here on AFR, on a replay each evening, weekday evening. You know, that's depressing, Kirby, what you just shared with us. I'll be honest with you. I don't know why I would be less than honest, but listen, in world history and today, you're used to dealing with people who are in it for the power or for the money or for the control. I'm talking about China, the North Korea guy, Kim Jong-un, or whatever his name is. He doesn't have much money here, but he has weapons, and he likes to express he likes to play the part of a big dog. You got Putin. I'm just talking about other people too around the world. The motivation is power, money, and control, and advancing their particular country's agenda, whatever it may be. In the case of China, it's communism, right? Or control, totalitarianism. However, so you can negotiate with those people a lot of times, right? But you're talking about somebody who's a religious nut. I say nut, or has these doomsday scenario religious
cultic.
Yes, religious ideas. What do you call it?
Apocalyptic.
Yeah. And they have the view that it's their job to bring about the end of the world so that their particular brand of religion can take over. So we need to kill everybody else. And they get nukes. That's the most. You can't reason with those people because they're not motivated by money and power and land and control. They're motivated by pleasing Allah. So
that's right.
So let me ask you this: where would you rank Iran in terms of danger to the world right now?
I think it's pretty dangerous. You remember when George W. Bush talked about the axis of evil, and of course Iran was in that list, and North Korea, and as if we need one more. We've got Russia and Ukraine, and we've of course got Israel and Hamas, and we've got China maybe in Taiwan, and now we got Iran. But it is dangerous, and in some respects you can certainly find some ways to use negotiating chips with Russia and with China. I don't know that you can do much with Hamas and any terrorist group, but you're right. I mean, you have to have people in office. I was glad when we had Mike Pompeo as the Secretary of State because I think he understands that.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we have a person like Marco Rubio. But unfortunately, we have a lot of people in the State Department. They don't understand that we can not deal with these kinds of individuals. And I think you have really hit the nail on the head as to why we are most concerned about whether or not Iran gets a nuclear weapon and why we should be concerned about the fact that the president has wanted to unfreeze all the funds that were frozen before in Iran.
Yeah, that's just beyond comprehension why you want to do any kind of financial negotiations with Iran, short of them verifiably stopping their nuclear program that they got going on over there. Well, the world's a dangerous place with a lot of dangerous players, and we need to pray as Christians. We definitely need to pray. If you can't answer this, can you stay 5 more minutes after the news?
I certainly can.
Okay.
I'd be glad to stay after the news.
Because I want to know why the worldwide anti-Semitism or hatred for Jews, they're a tiny percentage of the world's population. And it's like half the world hates them. And I want to know why that is, okay?
Okay.
Kirby, can you talk about that when we get back? Okay, so Kirby's going to stay over for the break, and we'll ask him that question, let him answer that question, because, folks, this anti-Semitism is just coming out in the open, and there is a civil war going on inside the Democrat Party in America right now over this very issue, and also what's going on college campuses. We see many college campuses, anti-Jewish expression, open. We'll be back momentarily. Stay with us.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Abraham Hamilton III.
If you really want to see the tides turning in our country, can I challenge you and encourage you? If the Lord could grab a hold of us in our family, you would see the tide in our politics turn.
The Hamilton Quarter, weekday afternoons at 5 Central on American Family Radio.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Intelligence assessments warn that U.S. interests may be terror targets in response to Israel defending itself against Hamas terrorist attacks. Tanya J. Powers has more.
An alert from the New York Counterterrorism Bureau highlights the heightened security calls, saying while there is no credible or specific threat, al-Qaeda affiliates have been called on to attack American, British, and French nationals due to the war between Israel and Hamas. Hezbollah called for a day of unprecedented anger against Israel and the U.S. on Wednesday during President Biden's trip to Israel. New York City police officials have told officers to wear their full uniforms while on duty until further notice, noting in a public statement that, quote, tensions have been rising since the attack on Israel earlier this month.
Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania expressed his support for Israel Wednesday when he also criticized some of his Democratic colleagues without mentioning them by name. Fetterman, in a series of social media posts, struck down calls for a ceasefire and questioned those who blame the deadly hospital blast in Gaza on Israel, writing that it is, quote, truly disturbing that members of Congress were quick to take the word of Hamas, who blamed the death of hundreds at the hospital on Israel over our key ally. Hillary Vaughn reports terrorist supporter Rashida Tlaib of Michigan is one of those Democrats who refuses to see the proof that Israel was not responsible, and she continues to speak out in favor of Hamas.
Progressive Congresswomen Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar were quick to condemn the hospital attack in Gaza when they thought Israel was behind it.
And that's what's been really painful. It's this just continue to watch people think it's okay to bomb a hospital. They can cry. I can cry. We all can cry.
But they are slow to correct the record now that we know that the Palestinian militant group is to blame. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar issuing a clarification to her tweet late last night, but her post with the misinformation saying Israel is guilty is still up. And so is Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib's post.
Congressman Tom Tillis of North Carolina said,
this sort of leadership or failure of leadership has no place on Capitol Hill.
Israeli Defense Forces spokesman Peter Lerner says some in the mainstream media are perpetuating Hamas talking points instead of reporting the truth.
I found it extremely frustrating that Hamas gets this platform, and I could not stop but thinking about an organization that butchers babies in their bedrooms, and then they get to say to the media, and it's just automatically accepted as fact, Hamas says, and as if it's enough that you attribute it to Hamas, and then it should be accepted or broadcasted.
Burning babies to generate electricity. That's the subject of this report from Charlie Butts.
For years, the pro-life organization Created Equal has been fighting against firms that pick up aborted babies from abortion clinics and then dispose of them. One of them is Curtis Bay Medical Waste Services, and they were sued. Created Equal President Mark Harrington tells AFN,
they've been found guilty of disposing of aborted babies and medical waste improperly, which is not any shock to us because we realized a long time ago that they were taking aborted babies and burning them in their incinerator and creating electricity, believe it or not, for the Baltimore, Maryland area.
And what were they doing with the babies in the past?
Before, they were throwing the medical waste into landfills.
According to the abortion industry, medical waste includes aborted babies.
Third world countries where they throw them in graves and landfills, we think that's barbaric, but we do that here. We just take them out of so-called surgery centers, we call it medical waste, and then we use it for electricity. I don't think that you can get any sicker than that.
After a plea agreement was reached, Curtis Bay Energy was ordered to pay a fine of $1.75 million. The company was also placed on probation for 2 years. I'm Charlie Butts.
Sales of previously occupied U.S. homes fell for the fourth month in a row in September. More news online at afn.net and on the AFN mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Forget about Facebook.
The last 10 days we've been banned twice, and is unbanning a word?
They put us under the ban. Christians and conservatives don't need you, YouTube.
Banned one day, banned again.
AFR programs are now live streaming on the AFA Streaming app. Now you can get shows like today's issues straight from the source.
Put back on the next.
Just say unbanned.
Unbanned.
Just search AFA Streaming or visit streaming.afa.net to sign up. Today's Issues continues on AFR with your host, Tim Wildman, President of the American Family Association.
Hey, welcome back to Today's Issues. This is the radio program. This is a radio program on American Family Radio. We thank you for listening. We'll be here for the next 25 minutes. I'm Tim Wildman with Fred Jackson and Ray Pritchard, and joining us now in studio is Steve Paisley Jordan. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Jordan.
Good morning, Jordan.
You said Jordan.
What did I say?
Jordan.
Did I call you Steve Jordan again?
Yeah.
Steve Paisley Jordan. My apologies.
Hi, Tim. I've been working for you for 8 years.
You don't have a line of shoes with Nike, right?
Oh, no, I don't.
All right, so I've done that a few times. I don't know what happens there, but Kirby Anderson is on the phone with us from Dallas. Kirby is with the president of Pro Ministries, and he's also heard each day here in the evenings with Point of View, and heard across the nation on many radio stations with Point of View. Probably, as far as I know, the longest lasting Christian talk radio show in America. Would I be right about that, Kirby? Has anybody else been around
longer?
So. Yeah.
51 years and counting, so I think anybody who's been around more than 51 years, well, we'll give them the accolades, but I think it is the longest running one, yes.
All right, Kirby, why is there so much vitriol and hatred for Jews around the world when they're just a tiny percentage of people on the planet?
It's hard to explain unless you look at it spiritually. I mean, again, we'll get Ray's comment if he wants, because you go to the book of Esther, just remember there, Haman wanted to destroy the people of Mordecai, and of course Esther jumps in there, and you have anti-Semitism that has existed for some time. I have a booklet that we put together, and by the way, I'll be glad to send it free to anybody that wants to write to us later, but it's the first time I realized the term anti-Semitism was only coined in the 19th century by Wilhelm Marr, a German, because he was seeing what was happening there. But to explain it theologically, God has a chosen people, the Jews, so obviously Satan is going to hate what God has chosen. So from a theological point of view, that makes some sense, but it still doesn't make any sense logically. In my booklet, for example, we point out that if you first go to Europe, we have certain countries where they did surveys of 6,000 Jewish people in Europe across 8 nations, and they found almost a majority, 48% in Hungary and 46% in France, were individuals that said that they were seriously thinking about immigrating from France or Hungary or other places in Europe because of anti-Semitism there. Well, of course, we can then talk about what has happened here. When you have Representative Ilhan Omar and a variety of others, really the whole squad, basically making anti-Semitic statements, and when anti-Semitism seems to have really begun to grow in the universities because of the desire to isolate Israel and to defund it and boycott it and all the rest, you are now seeing more evidence of anti-Semitism than we've ever seen before. And here's something that you only hear on American Family Radio, you will probably never hear on the mainstream media, when we always have our liberal and progressive friends tell us that the number of hate crimes in America has increased. That is is true, but they never tell you the next part. A majority of those hate crimes reported to the Justice Department are anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish. And when you think of, again, what do we have? Maybe 6 to 10 million people in this country that are Jewish, and yet more than half of those hate crimes are anti-Jewish. It shows you that anti-Semitism is really on the rise, and it's something that needs to be addressed. And Tim, as you mentioned just a minute ago, it is a chronic problem right now in the Democratic Party, and there's an unwillingness oftentimes in the leaders to really address that issue.
Yeah, Chuck Schumer, the leader of the Senate for the Democrats, he's a Jew. And he had people at his home last weekend in New York protesting against him and I think expressing anti-Semitism. And yet the people doing that would probably almost all of them would be defined as Democrats themselves.
Yeah.
So there's a civil war now going on in the Democrat Party. I don't know which side's going to win. Biden has chosen to support Israel, as he should. But, man, he's getting attacked from within, too. He had yesterday, Steve, there was a State Department official, I don't know how high level, I think, who quit.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. He decided that he was done. I think I might even have his name if they've named him. His name is Paul. His last name is Paul. Josh Paul. Worked for the State Department's Bureau of Political Military Affairs. He was responsible for transferring arms to key American allies, according to Fox. And he posted his resignation letter on social media saying continued lethal assistance to Israel prompted him to leave.
And then squad member Rashida Tlaib yesterday openly at a anti-Jewish protest openly took on Biden. Said the president is wrong in supporting Israel.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, Kirby, what is that? You said people could get a book from you or a booklet, or what'd you say?
Yeah, it's just a free booklet. It's just, it's only a couple pages, but it's just called A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism. Just go to the website, pointofview.net. Just leave an email saying, I want that free booklet that Kirby was talking about, or the anti-Semitism booklet. I checked, and we've got a whole box full of them, so I'd be glad to send it free of charge to anybody that would like to know more about some of the scriptural issues, some of the political issues, some of the key quotes, and even some of the myths that we need to dismiss, the myth of blood libel during the Middle Ages. How about this myth right now that Israel launched a rocket on the hospital? I mean, we just have one myth after another that just perpetuates this anti-Semitism. And so that's one of the things I'd be glad to make available to any of our listeners.
Steve, did you want to ask Kirby, related to what Kirby just talked about? Kirby, if you got to go, we'll say goodbye and talk to you next time. If you can hang around, can you hang around?
I sure can hang around.
Go ahead, Steve.
Hey, Kirby, how you doing?
Hey, Steve.
So, we're talking about this. You mentioned the hospital in Beirut. Background on
not
this.
Beirut, Gaza.
I'm sorry, in Gaza.
In Gaza.
See, you made fun of me about Steve Gordon.
I know.
You see, karma comes back to you, Steve.
It does.
Okay.
You mentioned the hospital in Gaza, and by the way, it used to be a Southern Baptist-run hospital back in the 50s, 60s.
That's why it's still called Baptist?
No, well,
that's right.
Yeah, that would be the reason. Anyway, a bomb went off in its parking lot.
So those mean old Christians, again, trying to help people around the world.
And Hamas immediately claimed that there was hundreds and hundreds of deaths because the Israel had bombed this hospital. Well, Israel came up with some video and other forensic evidence to suggest that it's not Israel. It was a Hamas rocket that actually misfired. And I want to start here. I'd love your thoughts on this, Kirby. The president was on Air Force One coming back from Israel, and he was talking to reporters. One reporter asked him about the hospital bombing and the who did it and everything. And Biden was quick to say, well, we didn't assign blame. We don't do that until we know for sure, and it does look like it was a Hamas rocket that was misfired. But then he said this, cut 7.
And I'm not suggesting that Hamas deliberately did it either. It's that old thing, got to learn how to shoot straight.
You got to learn how to shoot straight, he says.
So what's your point?
Well, our president is that was I guess what he's saying is you got to learn how to shoot straight so you hit Israelis, not your own hospital. But
oh, I see your point. Okay, yeah, that's an inarticulate way to describe what happened. Well, listen,
how about the fact that he said that we think it was from the other side? And I thought,
the other team. No, the other teams.
What he said. Other side. This is Hamas terrorists.
He's,
again, just one point, because I know you guys have some other things to get to, but here's a perfect argument for why people need to listen to today's issues and American Family Radio and even Point of View, and that is I can go down the list, and it is a long, long list of individuals in the so-called corporate media that went with the story that 500 people were killed. No, they weren't. That it was launched by Israel. No, it wasn't. That that there were people under a rubble. It actually hit a parking lot. And then finally, when the president even talked about it, he said, and well, we may think it might have been from the other side. And I'm thinking, from the mainstream media to the president of the United States, this is how to completely blow a story. And yet when you had that story come out, all of a sudden the president doesn't get to go to Jordan because they ended relations. Right. You have protests. You have people that have been killed because of the media malpractice that is taking place. And I think it's about time for people to realize that you can't trust the mainstream media even for some basic information from a story, because every part of that story was incorrect. And that's why I think people need to be listening to today's issues instead.
Let me tell you this, too. What's the old expression, lies go around the world before truth gets a chance to put its pants on? You ever heard that one?
I have.
And that's what happened with this hospital story. And it reminded me of what goes on oftentimes when cops are accused of brutality or against citizens. And the story gets put out there without much context or any wait for any facts to come out. And now sometimes the police do go over the top or commit acts that they shouldn't. However, 9 times out of 10, what these cases will prove is that when like in the Michael Brown situation in St. Louis, remember that? Then the guy that was
hands up, don't shoot.
Hands up, don't shoot. Remember that went around the world. Well, guess what? As it turns out, hands up, don't shoot never even happened. So
that's right.
I'm just saying, with
who can you trust
with this hospital situation? One other question, well, that you go, Kirby, and then Steve. But I got to ask you this, because I think one of the fundamental questions here about people's view on the Jews and Israel and our relationship to them, our being the U.S., is this. If you hear people say that the Israelis, the Jews, are on stolen land, if they use the word occupiers, if they use the word colonizers, you can't debate with these people. They're unreasonable. They are the people, although they may not be as violent as Hamas. The ideology is the same, in that the Jews and Israel is an illegitimate country and doesn't deserve the right to exist. Therefore, anything done against them is acceptable and should be commended. That's the view. And these are the same. They're cultural Marxists. They're the same people that were out there supporting Antifa and the BLM movement. Now, not the general public who supported Black Lives. We all believe Black Lives Matter. We all, in the Christian view, all lives matter, right? But I'm talking about the top leadership of Black Lives Matter. They were self-avowed Marxist. Okay, these same people, the diversity inclusion. What do you call that movement?
DEI.
DEI, yeah, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Okay, I was reading a story last night from a lady who's out of that movement. It was on the New York Post. She was in charge of diversity,
equity, inclusion
at a college campus or a hospital or something. Anyway, this is a big push inside corporations across America.
It was a junior college in California, De Anza College.
Okay, and she came out and she said, this movement promotes anti-Semitism. because they're the same movement. They hate white people too, and Christians. They hate white people. They hate Christians. They think the Jews are white colonizers. Okay, right. They do. They don't distinguish the Jews between. They call them white colonizers. So, that's what's behind this anti-Semitism. If you look at it, Steve, did you want to add anything to this?
Just to your point about the mainstream media, Kirby. Let me read you 4 headlines. The New York Times. This is all the day after the hospital was bombed or was hit. New York Times: Israeli strike kills hundreds in hospital, Palestinians say. Wall Street Journal: Israeli airstrike on Gaza hospital kills more than 500, Palestinian officials say. CNN: hundreds killed in Israeli strike on Gaza hospital, Palestinian officials say. AP: Hamas says Israel airstrike on Gaza hospital kills hundreds as Biden heads to the Middle East. These are major news outlets.
Right, and a lot of people just read the headlines or see the news story and they go, Israel bombed the hospital. That's terrible.
Yeah.
What's for lunch?
Yeah.
And they don't get the truth.
Yeah.
They don't get the follow-up. We don't wait for the truth to come out. All right, Kirby, thanks, my friend. Appreciate you joining us. Again, if people want that book, they go to your Point of View website?
Yeah, just go to pointofview.net, leave an email there, and we'll send them out. We're glad to do so. And thank you again for letting me be a part of what you're doing today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kirby. Kirby Anderson there joining us from Dallas. Ray, any thoughts on what we've been talking about last 5 minutes?
The most shocking thing about this, it's on everything. Every point Kirby made is exactly right. My only addition is to say that we are seeing a rise in anti-Semitism, and I might say it this way. They hate Jews, and they're proud of it, and they're saying it openly. I mean, anti-Semitism has always been a part of the underbelly of Western culture, if you will. But it was under the rocks, so to speak. But now you're out, you're proud, you hate the Jews, you hate the Jewish people, you hate the nation of Israel, and you can say it and suffer no repercussions, and in fact be lauded in public for it. And that is a very frightening change in the public discussion.
Yes. And these same people that are coming out openly anti-Semitic, with Jews being their number one target, guess who's 1A? Us. Christians, in particular conservative Christians, they hate our guts. These same people?
Yes.
And we're high on there, get rid of these people too.
Yes. Because we support Israel and the Jewish people.
Well, yes, that is true. And that's a big part of it. And the other part is, it's part of the this persecution that the Bible talks about, just because you identify with Jesus Christ.
That's right.
Huh? So it's both. It's our support of Israel politically, and our support and love for the Jewish people, because they are God's chosen people, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But also because we follow Christ, it's the persecution that comes with that, Steve.
It is. This anti-Semitism, they are targeting us, but the nexus of it is on college campuses across the United States. This is where it gathers and it festers and it metastasizes.
Well, remember you had the professor from, was out west somewhere?
Yeah, it was at
Cornell
University.
Cornell. And he was ecstatic the day of the attack, right after the attack on October 7th against those Israeli settlements.
But listen to this. There is an assistant professor of American Studies at UC Davis. This is in California, University of California, Davis. Her name is Gemma DeCristo. She tweets out, "One group of people we have easy access to in the U.S. is all these Zionist journalists who spread propaganda and misinformation. They have houses with addresses and kids in school. They can fear their bosses, but they should fear us more." And an emoji of a knife, an axe, and blood.
And she's a professor where?
Well, that person will be fired today.
We would hope.
I think, huh?
I hope.
There is some blowback for these people that like her, like that person right there. I've seen have y'all seen these stories about these super rich donors to colleges and universities.
Yeah,
Harvard,
and they're pulling their money.
Yep,
because they're saying we are not going to support a college or university who can't speak out against the slaughter of 1,400 people. Have you seen this?
Oh yeah, and there have been suggestions also that some of these anti-Israel student protesters on campuses here, they are here on student visas from countries like Qatar and even from Syria, et cetera, et cetera. There's a law in the books that says they can be thrown out of the country. If you're here in a student visa and you're promoting hatred against a particular group of people, you can be thrown out of the country.
Yeah. One other aspect of this is, or another aspect of this is, listen, in Islamic countries where Islam is dominant, all these quote rights that the political left in this country champion are non-existent.
That's right.
Are non-existent. I was reading a story last night about a woman who is a feminist. I'm talking about she is a liberal, a traditional classic liberal feminist. So she would be, she's liberal, very liberal. But she was calling out the feminist organizations and people who traditionally speak out for women in America and other places in the West, because she said when it comes to the treatment of women by Islam, they're silent.
That's right.
They're silent.
Mm-hmm.
So Israel would be a place that would be more liberal, and of course I don't necessarily agree with all of liberalism as with respect to LGBTQ and all that stuff that's being forced down our throats.
Mm-hmm.
But listen, LGBTQ, they got it made in America. You go over there to these Islamic countries, they'll cut your head off. Or women, they make them wear these veils or these burqas.
Mm-hmm.
So this woman was pointing out, how can you be silent about how these Islamic countries treat women? Well, then there must be something that's a higher priority for these people. And that is their hatred for Jews and for Christians supersedes their desire to champion women's rights. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So,
but truth means nothing to Satan's crowd.
Right.
Truth is the enemy.
Right.
For Satan's crowd.
Yeah. All right, we're just about out of time here. Steve, you got another story? You got any happy news, Steve?
Well, I do. I do say you want to be careful when you're driving through a certain town in Georgia. This is a man named Connor Cato was doing 90 and a 55. He was expecting a ticket with some money, but instead he got a summons and a ticket for $1.4 million. That's how much they were going to charge him for driving over the speed limit.
What?
And he called. He says, well, this is Savannah, by the way. He called and said, this has to be a mistake. They said, no, it's not. You owe us that much money unless you come to court, and then we'll set a reasonable amount. But they want people who go, I think, 30 miles an hour over the speed limit, 35 over the speed limit. They automatically required to show up in court. This is a way to get them there.
90 and a 50?
90 and a 55.
Yeah, that's terrible. That's putting a lot of people at risk right there. But $1 million, they got his attention, huh?
Yeah, they did.
1 point whatever it was.
1.4.
Some people might call that extortion.
Yeah, I know, right?
That ticket.
It worked.
It worked.
Huh? Yeah, it worked, I guess.
Yeah.
He probably thought that was a mistake, but he called, and that's
was what they meant to put.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you imagine going down to the police station to want to pay your ticket, and you got your checkbook out?
Make it for 1 point.
I'd write a check for $1.4 million. Good luck cashing it. But.
Right. Boing, boing, boing. All right. Thank you, Ray.
You bet. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Fred.
You bet.
Steve, appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Our thanks to Kirby Anderson and Jan Markell for being on with us today. Our thanks also to Brent Creeley, our producer. We thank you for listening. Have a wonderful Thursday, rest of your Thursday, folks. We pray for our country and for the world. And we'll see you back here tomorrow for Trivia Friday.
Let's see, if something costs less, but people are happier with it, that sounds like something to look into, and that is MediShare. And maybe you've heard switching to MediShare to pay for health care can save many families up